Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Always Moving Podcast, episode number 24. And as today, we have our new beautiful guest, Trent McClellan. How's it going, sir?
Not too bad. How are you guys?
I'm great. It's very hot down in Florida all the time. So coming from Alberta, you make adjustments.
I know. Does Florida, do you just get used to it eventually where you're like, okay, yeah, this is something I can live with. This is fine. This is, yeah. Or do you just sweat constantly?
I'm constantly showering, I can tell you that. I don't know how long it would take, but it sure hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, it's you're still very Canadian, right? Like you're still reminded daily, like, oh yeah, I was not born here. This is my body's not used to any of this. And when it's 15 degrees Celsius down there, you're probably still rocking shorts. Yeah, you're like, yeah, this is nice.
That's what I've been doing. I have more pants since I got here. So
exactly, you're that guy. You're like the guy here in Canada who like spring, that first day where it's sunny but it's not warm at all. But it's like shorts, flip flops. I'm doing it. Let's go.
The guy in high school, he's like 6'5", 300 pounds. His shorts through the snow all the time. He's that guy.
Yeah, my legs don't get cold. My legs don't get cold. I don't feel it. It's good. It's great. Yeah, that guy exists.
Then, man.
Yeah. Why do you have to go see a doctor with severe frostbite? What's that about? No, it's not that. It's something else. Skin condition. Don't worry about it.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, psoriasis.
So how are you? You're in Halifax right now, yes?
Yeah, I'm good. I am in the middle of a 2-week quarantine here right now again. So it's, of course, when you come to the Atlantic bubble, that's the deal, that you have to 2-week quarantine. So not too bad. Once you've done it once, you kind of get the hang of it. And things are locked down anyway, right? Like they are in Alberta. So you're not really missing much, to be honest. It's not like everything else is going on and you're trapped inside. So it's quite manageable.
Yeah. I was curious about the Atlantic bubble because that's something I always heard before I moved here, because I was in Alberta a couple months ago and it was like, oh, you can't go East Coast. Like they don't want you there.
Yeah, they take it pretty serious here. Like you don't see a lot of, I'm sure there are anti-maskers and stuff, but like you don't see a lot of it here. And for the most part, the community in the city, especially in Halifax, people buy into what's going on. Whatever they say, the protocol is, people try to stick to it. So I think this place will have a shot at getting back to normal quicker than a lot of the other parts of Canada, just based on how things are trending at the moment.
Yeah, that's good, because looking, you see online about people in Alberta, it's a bit of a mixed bag over there.
A lot of rage, there. You're like, can we just bring it down just a little bit? I was in Calgary and I remember just some guy yelling at me because I stopped to let some car in or whatever. And the guy behind me just lost it. And I was like, there's just an underlying rage there all the time. I'm like, people, go just watch something funny. I don't know what to tell you. Like, just bring it down a notch. So yeah, you can feel it in the air for sure.
Yeah, I see it all the time online. I'm like, oh, I don't need this. I'm in Florida. No one cares here. And it's crazy seeing Alberta go back to like phase 1. And then a couple of weeks ago, I was at Disney World, and it's
right. Yeah, it's weird. And I was just talking to a friend of mine about it, and part of I think the toughest part for a lot of people, if you haven't gotten sick, thank God, or haven't lost anyone to this thing. But the other part for the rest of us, I guess, is just like the uncertainty. Like you just never know in which direction we're going, and you're a press conference away from drastic changes happening and lockdown. And I think when you go through a few cycles of that, it does wear you down over time, So I think that's the hardest part for people is the uncertainty, I think.
Yeah, I've seen some friends who at the beginning, they're like, okay, we'll quarantine, we'll mask up and do this. And then you've seen it kind of start to trend in the other way where they're like what's going on? I'm sick of this or whatever.
Yeah. So. It's like everybody's diet, right? That you start, you're like, man, I'm just going to drink juice all day, every day. And then by day 9, you're like, I wouldn't mind some bacon, some eggs, what's wrong with the old me? Was he such a bad guy? I like that weight. No. I like old me. Old me was great. Old me's got lots of clothes that still fit. What am I going to do? Buy a full wardrobe? You start going down that road of like, I'm fine with old me. Old me is coming back. So.
Did you find yourself learning anything new? Because everyone's always like, especially the beginning, people were baking or anything. Were you on that trend? Did you learn anything? Did you?
I promised myself that I was going to just noodle around with guitar more. I bought a guitar a few years ago and I just have not really spent any time to learn any songs. Like I just know a couple chords. And I have still not done that. I still noodle around, but I cannot play a song. So that's something I gotta commit to. I don't think there's going to be a Juno Award in my future anytime soon. We're going to be ways away from that. So that was the thing I said I was going to do, but I have not done it, to be honest. So
Yeah.
I need to pick up the old guitar again, I think.
The guitar's sitting there next to your juice, and
Yeah, yeah. Like, oh, another one of those or those. Could I write a song about juice? I don't know. Like maybe that's what it ends up being. I sing some jingle for Tropicana or something. I mean, that's my way into this creative journey into the guitar.
yeah, it's not bad. So
No.
I want to go back because for me, coming from this small town, I'm from Onaway, Alberta. There's no chance you've heard of it. I'm from Onaway, Alberta. We're about 60K out or west of Edmonton.
Okay.
And I'm always curious what they learn where they grew up. You're from Newfoundland.
Yep.
And I've never been to the East Coast except for the Gander Airport.
There you go. There you go. Central. That's as central as it gets in Newfoundland. Like you were in the heart of the bullseye.
Because we were flying to Greenland and we had to go to Gander to pick up some handball players from Quebec or whatever. So what was it like growing up in Newfoundland, and what's that kind of has it shaped you who you are?
Oh yeah, I think definitely.
Yeah.
Newfoundland and Labrador is it's a very storytelling culture. Like people, the economy has always been rough. The weather can be harsh, especially in the winter. And over time, in order to entertain ourselves, I guess we just had to use humor and music and storytelling.
Yeah.
And so, what you'll find in Newfoundland in general is people don't take themselves too seriously, and they also don't take other people too seriously. I mean, like, so it's like, yeah, don't think you're too good, and here's how you're not. Like, that's always right there, which I think is a very Irish trait. Like, apparently, Ireland is very similar,
Yeah.
So when you grow up in that, you tend to you kind of always seem to know your place. You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like don't think you're too big for your britches, so to speak. So you grow up in like all my friends were funny, and humor was just a normal part of your day, as I'm sure it was for a lot of people. But in Newfoundland in particular, I think people use it as a life vest almost.
Yeah.
It's like to get through. The fishery went away, and people were like, "Well, what do we do now?" Like so I think humor, as much as we've produced a lot of people who've gone on to have careers in humor and entertainment, I think they learned at a grassroots level just from trying to cope with how difficult the environment was at times. Both economically, like I said, weather. It's pretty remote as well. I mean, there's only 500,000 people in all of Newfoundland and Labrador, so there's a lot of empty space where it's just like small towns, like your hometown, but it's so it's. Those things shape you over time.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm always curious, and most of them coming from the West, most of what I learned from like Newfoundland, Labrador, and stuff comes from 22 minutes.
That's right, yeah.
Maybe it's not like the best teaching method, but that's kind of this image we have coming from the West. So
Yeah, well, I mean, the original 22 Minutes cast were all Newfoundlanders, right? Like it was kind of like a comedy troupe, and they thought they'd be doing maybe 4 or 5 shows to kind of just fill in the summer. And now, you're going into season 29 of that show, right? So it's one of those things where I think the sense of humor was similar amongst all of them, and they all kind of were on that same page of like, yeah, every target can get it at some point. Like it doesn't matter if you're the prime minister, if you're a mayor, if you're someone who wrote something ridiculous somewhere online. It's like everybody's games. Yeah, it's just kind of that's pretty much a Newfoundland and Labrador attitude. Like yeah. Who's getting it today? All right. So,
you stretch and walk out.
Yeah. Got a list of people like, okay, all right. I didn't get to that person. There we go. All right. You start whipping stuff up. So, when you grow up in that environment, it's hard to develop an ego, I would say. It will keep an ego in check very easily.
I love that because Alberta's, it's its own thing. And I feel like I'm much more Newfie at heart than I am.
Yeah. It's a different mentality. In Alberta, I found too, people were like, I started stand up in Calgary, when I moved there, because there was no comedy scene, obviously, in Newfoundland at the time. There were no clubs or anything. And so when I moved in 2003, I remember writing an email back to friends in Newfoundland. I go, dude, I got the sense that whatever you want to accomplish here in Alberta, you can. Like there's just the economy's booming.
Yeah.
Whatever career you want to go after, it's possible here. But people, like even stuff like people would move all the time in Alberta, and I never
Yeah.
understood that because in Newfoundland, people would like buy a house and then they would stay in that house till they died. Do you know what I mean? Like it was like up in Alberta, it was like, oh, there's a new development with a man-made lake. If you'd
Yeah.
like to have a
Man-made lake. Everyone loves them.
bonus room. And I'm like, what's a bonus room? Like, what is this stuff? So it was just always people trying to go one up, one up,
Yeah.
one up, you know, like you get a car for 2 years, you trade it in, you buy a new car. I was like, what is happening? Like it was a bit of a culture shock for sure.
Yeah, and that's something I've experienced because I'm 29. So coming out of high school, and then once people turn 25 and everything, maybe they're onto their second house or whatever. I'm like, well, this is
Yeah.
crazy. Like, what's wrong with that house?
I know. And I remember I was working at Boys and Girls Club when I first
Yeah.
moved to Calgary. And there was a younger guy there who worked there. And I'd say to him, like, what are you doing this weekend? And he's like, oh, me and my brother bought a house and we're fixing it up to flip it. And I was like, what? What do you mean? What does that mean? What does flip mean? Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And this, of course, was during that boom. And like him and his brother would just go do this. And then 2 months later, they'd sell this house for and make a couple, $200,000 off this house. And I was like, what is happening? Like it was another planet to me. It really was. Like here's the other thing too. People would like get disgruntled at a job in Calgary or in Alberta and would just go, quit and walk across the street and get a job somewhere else. I came from a place with like high unemployment. Like you just held on to whatever job you had. It was like, I hate working here, but you know what? It's a check. And I'm going to just suck it up and smile and I'll be at that corporate Christmas party. Yes, I will.
Yes.
Like Alberta was like, nah, I don't like it here. I'm going to go over there and get a job and make more money. It was insane.
Yeah. I remember there was a huge influx of people from the East Coast coming in at that time too, like growing up, and then it's like, oh, Newfies. They kept hearing the word Newfie. I'm like, then I learned what Newfie was. And it's
yeah.
Like, okay.
And it's weird too, because like that term even has evolved over time. Like a lot of people in Newfoundland Labrador don't like that term because it implies that you're stupid, you're a goofy Newfie, you're less than kind of thing. So in Newfoundland and Labrador right now, there's a lot of people who are like, if you said that word, they'd be like, whoa, 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 like it'd be a big deal. So it's like you realize that relationship between Alberta and Newfoundland has been going on for a long time. With like a lot of my friends back when I was in high school were graduating and going up to work at like resorts and stuff like Jasper and places like that, and getting jobs at hotels and stuff. And so that that train and pipeline from Newfoundland to Alberta has been going on for quite a while.
So going back to maybe when you were younger and how you said kind of everyone was more or less had a sense of humor where you grew up, when did you decide you wanted to pursue comedy, or when did you think like, oh, maybe I can do this? Or were you were you a class clown, or did you get a kick out of making people laugh? Like what was your first step towards kind of this pursuit?
I think I was funny fairly early on. I think like a lot of people, you develop a sense of humor as more of a defense mechanism. Like I was a black kid growing up in a mostly white town. I hadn't seen another black person until I was probably like 11 or 12, where another kid moved. It was like, oh, wow, okay, there's a couple of us. All right. My grandparents raised me and they were white, so it was like, I just didn't have anyone that looked like me in my general vicinity. So you end up being the center of attention, whether you wanted to be or not, because you just look different than everybody else. So I think I got used to being the center of attention fairly early. And then you use humor, like I said, as a way of kind of shifting the dynamic of a social interaction. Like if you're funny, people are paying attention for the right reasons now. Like you're kind of controlling it now. So I always loved making people laugh, but I was a class clown in the sense that I was doing it like recess time, lunchtime. I wasn't disruptive during class or whatever.
About it.
Yeah. I wasn't like, McClellan, go to the office. I'd be like, all right, see you later. I was pretty good like that way. But I used to hold court like on sports trips. Like I played basketball, soccer. It was like you're on the bus, you're in the hotels, you're like clowning around in the gym, all that stuff. That's where I did it. But I said this to other people, like to me, being a comedian or having a career in entertainment was just something that was like on television, like, cause there was no access to any of that in my hometown. Corner Brook, Newfoundland, my hometown was like 30,000 people. And I'm like, well, where would you even remotely go attempt something along those lines? I didn't even know where to look. So I just had normal jobs working with like kids at community centers and boys and girls clubs and stuff. Yeah. In 2003, when I got ready to move to Calgary, I realized I did some research and I was like, oh, they have an amateur night at a comedy club. So I was like, I should try that. I won't tell anybody, but I'll just go and see what happens. And so eventually I got the courage to go to an amateur night at a comedy club and was like, oh man, this is what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. Like the second I got off stage, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to go after.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because a friend and I, we also run a different podcast, and we always talk, oh, let's go to a open mic night, but not tell anyone because we don't want people that we know
That's
there.
Right. That's right.
Do you remember the first show that you did?
I do. I was terrified, and I didn't know what was going on that night. So what happens is you go to these amateur nights and you can go to a workshop for an hour first. So they have whatever the headliner was for that week. They would sit there for an hour and take questions from all these amateurs and tell you their tips about stand up in the business. Yeah. And so I'd gone to that for a couple of weeks. So I'd be writing notes down like, okay, do this, don't do that, watch you for the whatever. And then there was a competition coming up. So I thought, I'm going to enter this competition. My first time ever on stage, I'll just enter a competition. Like, well, who does that, right?
Here we go.
Yeah, like that's a great way to start, being judged right off the top. So I decided to sign up for this competition. And this competition was in another week or two. But the manager of the club came up to me and said, hey, I saw you signed up for the competition, but that's not for a few weeks. Do you want to go up tonight so that your first night is not going to be, in a competition scenario? And I was like, it was one of those things where I was like, I got to do it now. Yeah. I got to do it now. If I overthink it. So I really had like literally half an hour to kind of prepare a set, but I had ideas written down and jokes and stuff. And then, I went on stage and luckily it went well. Because I often think, what if it didn't go well? Would I have had the courage to go back the second time? But luckily I had jokes about urinal etiquette and just like, oh my God. I think thinking you're so brilliant, like no one's ever thought of this ever, realizing like, yeah, everyone's thought of it. But it got laughs and I was just like, all right, I can do this. So yeah, I remember also the most scared I ever was in my life. You're just, your first time, you're terrified, terrified.
Yeah, because my friend Douche and I, we talk and we write down jokes. We used to work together building playgrounds. And while we're building, we would just write these jokes. We're like, oh, this is good. Like, I think this will land. But he's terrified to go on stage. And I'm like, man, just go try it. Just go out there, go for 2 minutes, see what you do. And just.
That's all you can do. Yeah.
Would you say that's what it is? You just got to take that plunge?
Yeah, because it's like, like the difference between being funny with your friends and then going at 8 o'clock and making strangers laugh is very different because they don't know you. They have no reference point. They didn't have beers with you down in your basement last weekend. They didn't grow up in the same town you grew up in, probably. Like they're all different ages, have had different backgrounds. So you're trying to connect with strangers in mere seconds from this time you walk on the stage. So the only way you're really going to know if any of this material works is to go in front of these strangers and see if it actually relates to them. And it's just repetition over time and getting comfortable up there. And the more you get up, it's like anything, the more you get up and do it, the more comfortable you feel doing it. And, but yeah, I mean, I remember a guy once walked into one of these amateur nights and he goes, so how much time do we get? And they were like, well, you get like 5 minutes. It's your first time on stage. He goes, I got 2 hours of material. We're like, okay, well. So he walked up, he did his spot, and he bailed after 3 minutes because the audience was like, no. So, and one of the comics goes, I thought you had 2 hours of material. As he walked by, just grabbed his jacket and left. It was like, because it's different. It's different than holding court with your buddies. There's some of the same things that are transferable, but trying to get an audience to follow you on the path you're on, that mindset or that thought process when you're on stage, trying to get an audience to follow there's a skill to that in a craft.
Yeah. How does it feel now when you go up on stage, if you do a stand-up? Well, I mean, not COVID related, but if you went up to do a stand-up now, do you still get nervous at all, or?
You get a little bit. It's like an athlete, like you would get like before a big game. It's like you just wanted to get going. Like the more standing around, the pre-show, pre-game. Like when I played soccer in university and stuff, I was just like, let's just go. Like, kickoffs at 4. It's like, 3 o'clock, you're jazzed already. So it's like that. But as you get more years of experience doing stand-up, you can really enjoy yourself up there. Like it's not as much of a like just holding on for dear life. You can actually sit in the pockets and enjoy it and slow it down in your mind a little bit, and it's far more enjoyable. So I love it. But even after a few months being away from the stage, you still feel a little bit like, oh man, like I haven't been on in 3 or 4 months. Like, can I still find it again? And so, but it comes back to you fairly quickly.
Okay. And I was curious too, do you happen to remember, or do you have in mind, say what your best show was, or like more importantly, your worst show? Did you ever really bomb one where it's like, ooh?
Man, oh yeah, if you're a comedian, you've bombed and bombed hard. Like there's any comedian says, I've never bombed. It's like, right. Yeah, man, you have shows all the time, especially because when I started doing stand up, I learned quickly that you can make way more money doing like corporate shows where a company hires you to like, we're having a holiday party and we need you to be our entertainment. And you're like, okay. And you realize you're going to go play for people who may not even enjoy
Oh,
working there. They hate it. It's these big round banquet tables. So that means half of them are not even facing you. They're back on to you because they're just like, they're fiddling with their phones, scrolling through, like just don't want to be there. It could be at like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Wednesday in a big, you know what I mean? So you're walking in, you're -5 to start. Like they don't, and here's how you know you're in trouble at a corporate. If the, if these people don't shut up when their boss is up there at the microphone and he's like, we obviously the first quarter there, we obviously it was a bit of a rough start there, but we turned a corner there, at the start of the second, and they're just babbling on like they're eating the buffet and they don't care. I'm like, I have no shot. If this guy signs the paychecks and they're like, don't care. I'm like, well, what chance in hell do I have? Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, if you're a comedian, you've had those, and those corporate shows are just, it's like having a set of handcuffs on. You're like, how do I get out of this thing? But, so yeah, I've had lots of those. And best shows are like, because it could be a small crowd or a big crowd, but sometimes you're just in tune with each other, with the audience, and they're in tune with you. And yeah, and you can play these beautiful theaters. That's the cool thing about touring across the country is that, you get to see all these amazing old theaters that like have been around since the early 1900s and been refurbished, and incredible sound and lights. And you see all the posters of, all the bands and musicians and comedians and stuff that have played there before. So you're like, my God, like there's so much history in all these places, So it's a very interesting life, that's for sure.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So from there, when did you start up with 22 minutes? And
so go ahead.
How did that process work? Did you like audition, or how did this work for you?
So with 22 minutes, I came as a guest writer for a couple of seasons. Yes. So I would come in for like 2 weeks at a time, and I'm writing like, desk jokes and writing some sketches. And then sometimes they'd put me out like as a correspondent, like, okay, you're going to be on the street today asking people questions and whatever. So I did that for 2 different stints. And when I walked away from the second stint, I had a feeling, I was like, I feel like I'm going to get an offer to come back maybe, but I thought it would be back as a writer. I thought like, okay, they might bring me back. And this is a weird story, but the Amazing Race Canada, I was doing a segment for them. If they were doing a comedy challenge or whatever, stand-up comedy challenge in my hometown. Ironically, they were in Newfoundland. And so they asked me to write a bunch of jokes for the participants or whatever. So I did that, and I hosted it, that section. And I arrived to do it the day before. We're just going over some stuff. And I'm talking to 2 fine art students that were there helping out from the local college. And I was like, oh, what do you guys want to get into? And they're like, oh, I want to get involved in entertainment and performance and stuff. And I was like, you got to accept that when you're in this life, especially in entertainment, your life can change with a phone call. Like you can get an email or a phone call and suddenly you don't live in that town anymore. You live here. You're moving. You're going to go to this audition, whatever. Your life can change quickly. Literally an hour and a half later, my phone goes off and it's my agent going, I've just received an offer for you to be a cast member of this hour's 22 minutes. And I go, sorry, what? And they're like, yeah, like they're offering for you to be a cast member. And I was like, can you send that to me in an email?
Yeah.
Because I need to read that on paper. Like I was like, just kind of like, what? So it was a pretty amazing experience because you realize only so many people have been, cast members on that show. It's like being an astronaut, right? It's like, how many folks have been an astronaut? So, and that was it. It was just such a cool moment to after just having this conversation with these 2 students, and then suddenly my phone goes off. So yeah, that was it.
That's cool, because then they were like, wow, he wasn't full of it. That's true.
Yeah, he's actually, I don't know if he set that up, but that was pretty damn cool. I don't even know what the email was. We didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
But that's amazing that guy made all that effort to make that story. That's incredible.
So when you first started out as a full-time cast member, what was that like? Did some of the older, like the vets, did they help you through it, or you were kind of used to it because you've done the 2 segments or the...
Yeah, it helped seeing how the sausage is made, because once you're there and you see how quickly stuff is done and nothing's precious. So your idea that you had that it's going to be this and this and this, excuse me, and then suddenly it gets chopped up or it's not going to get made or whatever, like you just learn to move on fast. So that really helps to be
Yes.
able to see that for a couple seasons. And then you're kind of just like, yeah, like the other cast members obviously were very supportive and helpful, and everybody on the crew is just such a great team of people.
Yeah.
We're very, very supportive and stuff. And then you just kind of find your way as you're going, because it's so many different skill sets. It's reading a teleprompter. It's, doing sketches. You could be in 4 different sketches in one day with 4 different looks. Like it's very quick, and you have to be able to transition from what you were doing just a minute ago to now we're doing another thing in 30 minutes. Like it's just quick. So it's a lot of different skill sets to kind of just help you evolve over time. But the first season, I remember Susan Kent said to me, she goes, "You're going to feel like you're underwater for the first 3 months, and there'll be a break at Christmas, and you'll feel like you can come up for air and take a breath. And then in January, you go back under the water." And you hold your breath till the end of the season. And there's a lot of truth to that. Like that's the speed at which things are done.
Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Cause like I grew up watching 22 Minutes, and I don't watch it down here, but my parents watch it. Everyone knows it. So what's it been like as a cast member? Do people like, "Oh, you're that guy"? Or
yeah, I get a lot of that. You look familiar. That's what I get. I get like, you're going through security or something at an airport. They're like, "Hey, you look like someone." And I'm like, "You're the guy that works at your bank," or like, I don't know. So I just don't, whatever. It's kind of funny. It's like, I joke all the time. Like I don't really think about it. Like I just kind of you live your life and walk around, and sometimes you get recognized, sometimes you don't. I always assume people don't know who I am. I think it's it would be a big misstep to walk around thinking that people do know who you are. I think that
hey, here we are.
Hey, I'm here.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I always think, assume that they don't know who you are and be pleasantly surprised if they do. And that's kind of how I treat it. And again, I think that comes back to my Newfoundland roots of like, do not get too big for your britches, and know who you are. So that's kind of how I approach it.
That's awesome, man. And then last thing I want to touch on is you run your own podcast, The Generators.
Yeah. I love it. It kind of started with me, especially when you're a comedian, you spend so much time in cars with other comedians, and you have amazing conversations. They can be silly at times. They can be very serious at times. And I just thought, like, I love that. I've always loved sitting down with people and having interesting conversations and learning stuff and learning about their life and their process. So I thought, why don't I start capturing those? So I started the podcast on my own a couple of years ago. And I thought, no, I want to start having guests. I want to have just bring people in from different walks of life. And it's been amazing. I mean, to have Ron McLean and, Alan Doyle, incredible guests over time. And they've all had such varied careers and experience, and you learn so much from them. So it's as much greed on my end to just kind of be taking in all this data, like, interesting, good to know, write that down. Right. And just seeing that, everyone's life comes with struggle. Everyone's life comes with ups and downs and uncertainty, and they have to find a way to navigate it. And I find that stuff inspiring. And so when you can put that out to the world and let other people listen to that, then hopefully they can plug their own life into that, and so on. So it's been a lot of fun to have those conversations with people.
Yeah. And sorry. When I started the podcast too, that was the same thing. It was like, oh, my friend is doing this. My one friend's an engineer and he builds bridges. And I've never seen anyone love bridges as much as this guy. I'm like, exactly. Well, I got to pick his brain and figure this out. And then I'm like, well, maybe someone else might want to hear that too. So then I went from there. And then it's a friend of mine who's a teacher in the pandemic. It was her first year starting was when COVID started. I'm like, well, I got to hear this. Like,
what's your story? Yeah. It's so weird. And everyone, you walk through streets daily and you think about like all these people who are passing you with all these different life experience, like how they were raised, the town they grew up in, what their career is, relationships with their family. Like everyone's got such a varied story. And so when you sit down, I think there's something to learn from every single person you talk to. Like it's, if you're generally curious and interested, then it's a great thing to capture and share with other people, right?
Yeah. And I get that all the time. I remember I was working as a delivery driver and I was at a 4-lane intersection in Edmonton. It was like this old couple with a dog with a cone on. There was like this young guy who was wearing a toque. It's hot as hell out. I don't know why he's wearing this. And it was like this very mismatched group. And I just like, at my lunch break thing, I just kind of jotted it down. I'm like, okay, this couple, this. I'm like, that's a story right there. Like, what is
Yeah.
everyone? Where are they going? We're all going the same direction.
Yeah. Well, that's how comedians think, right? All the
Yeah.
time. Like you would see that and I would go like, okay, that's something for the stage. I don't know what it is yet,
Yeah.
but there's definitely something there. And then you would sit down with that and go like, okay, I got to figure out an angle, how to bring this on stage or what that joke's going to be. And yeah, when you're a comedian, your radar is on all the time. It's just like, you might not say it out loud, but you're always taking in data and information and, oh, that's weird. Okay. Interesting. George Carlin used to call it, he wouldn't necessarily say something's funny, but he would say it has comedic potential.
Yeah.
So he would go like, okay, and he would write that down, and then like he'll visit it later, like he'll sit down with it much later with all these other ideas he has, and try and figure out a thread through all of it, and then make a bigger bit. But yeah, man, there's stuff around you all the time that you can just notice and go like, there's some soil there I could use at some point. So
yeah. Florida is a hotbed of those. You see some weird stuff down here. So.
Oh yeah, did you find it amazing? Like, I assumed you'd been to America before you moved to Florida, right? Yeah. I remember my first time going to Florida because the first place I ever went to in America was Florida. Yeah. And I remember going like, up to that point, I always thought like, it's like Canada, but it's like hot, right? Like that's what I thought. Yeah. And then I got down to Florida and I was like, oh no, it's not like Canada at all. Like these people love guns, and there's that guy's really, is he wearing a flag? Like what is it? What is happening? Like you realize quickly, yeah, like this is not Canada 2.0, but that's why I think it's nice to get down there early in life, because you realize quickly, like, okay, it's a little different here. So, yeah.
Like 2 years ago, my friend and I, we road tripped the entire U.S. and we saw like every team in their baseball stadium. We saw all 30 teams play.
Oh, wow. Nice.
And like one of the first things we noticed when we crossed the border by Chilliwack in BC there, it was like just guns and fireworks. And it was like, it's literally, 40 feet from Canada, but the houses were different. And it was like, okay, it's not as similar as people make it out to be. So,
yeah, we're not in Canada anymore. And I remember too, like it might be different now, but I remember when I went down, I was there for 4th of July. And I thought like, oh, there's probably going to be a city. It was in Tampa. There's probably going to be like a city firework display that we can all go check out. I don't even know if there was, because everyone on the street had fireworks. It was like they were just spending hundreds of dollars on fireworks, and they're just outside in their driveways like, yeah. And I was like, what is happening? Like, I was like, yeah, the cops are going to be here any minute. They're like, nope, no, they're not. I was like, yeah. Like it was amazing. I was like, oh, you guys take freedom to a whole new level down here. It's like, oh no, do whatever we want. Like that's what we mean by freedom. And it was very eye-opening. I remember being very scared as a Canadian. And I remember feeling relief when I got back on Canadian soil. I was like, I dropped my shoulders. I was like, okay, yeah, all right, I can breathe it. Gonna get a Tim Hortons coffee here, and okay, good. Oh, the money's all colored. Yeah, I like that. I missed that. Yeah, remember the bills are all different colors. It's nice.
When we did Detroit, and then we had to go to the Blue Jays game, and we crossed over. Tim Hortons was like the first stop, and you see it, and it just kind of gets cleaner, and and their horns at everybody, and it's like, oh, this is nice.
Yeah, it's like a hug. It's like a big hug when you cross over the border. The Tim Hortons is like, oh yeah, we remember you. Welcome back. Come on in. It's all good. It's all good. So, yeah, I learned that early. I was like, yeah, it's a little different for sure.
And even especially the border security is a lot different going one way or the other, because we came in. And there was this bald guy, and he didn't like us instantly. I don't know what we did, but he's just like questioning everything. And then we go back. This nice woman just like, oh, welcome back. Just come right in. It's like, oh.
Yeah. Hey, guys, you left your hat. There you go. Take it. Go ahead. Yeah, you're like, oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a different vibe for sure. You do appreciate it once you travel. The more you go back and forth, I guess, it probably becomes more normal. Yeah. But that first time, it was very, very eye-opening. I remember my first time, too. I was like in my late 20s the first time I went to America, or mid to late 20s. And the question I got from the American border guard was, you never been to America before? I go, no. He goes, why not? That's what he said. Why not? I was like, I never had a chance to go before. He goes, So this is your first time? I'm like, yeah. He's just writing stuff down. I'm like, I've done nothing wrong. Like everyone's got to have a first time going. Like why was it such a big deal? But I guess he thought like, oh, really? Late 20s, never been? Yeah.
So I'll put a check mark there. You're gonna go for the inspection.
That goes in your file. Okay, I'm going to see you in secondary here real quick. I was like, what's happening? I don't know. So yeah, it was, they try and freak you out on that first one for sure.
Because when we crossed, he's like, how are you going to pay for this trip? And I'm like, with money? I'm like, well, that's probably the wrong answer. But
with this bag of pelts, there we go. That's what we use up in Canada.
Down there.
Every transaction is the barter system. So yeah.
Well, Trent, I appreciate you being on. I don't want to keep you any longer, but we got a rapid fire before we end.
Perfect.
Rapid fire with the guests.
Love rapid fire. Perfect.
Okay, we got 8 of them today.
Boom.
What's the best meal you prepare?
Wow, best meal I prepare. I like grilling steak.
Okay. Favorite hockey team?
It is the Calgary Flames, but it is tough right now to love that team.
My Alberta fans won't love to hear that.
Ugh.
What's your favorite Newfoundlander slang? You have one that you still use or bust out? Or a good one? Or
like hello in Newfoundland is like, what are you at? Like, what are you at? Like, and Newfoundlanders know what that means. People from Newfoundland Labrador have probably no idea what that means, but it's just like, if I walked in a room, you were just sitting there, I go, hey, what are you at? Like, just what's going on, So yeah, I think that'll never go away. I don't think.
I like that. I'll see that around here, see how it goes.
Yeah, see if they know what you mean.
Best province to do stand-up in?
Ooh, they're all great. Let me start by saying that. Yeah. But they're all great. I mean, because everything brings a little bit different. Obviously, going back to my home province is always great because there's a bit of a home feel there. But they're all great. Yeah.
Okay. Mountain versus beach vacation?
Ooh. I will say this, it depends on your mood. I think before you book a vacation, you got to ask yourself, what do you need? Sometimes you need beach, water, all that stuff. Sometimes you're like, no, man, I just want quiet and mountains. So I think it depends on my mood because I love both. I love like Canmore, Banff, all that whole area, but I also love sitting on a tropical beach and just listening to waves. So I would take both. Is there a place that's tropical with mountains and then just a beach below it? I'm sure there is, probably in South America somewhere.
It probably exists.
Yeah, Peru probably. Yeah.
Favorite Canadian musician?
Canadian musician. One of my favorite bands growing up was a band called The Watchmen out of Winnipeg, and they're still playing stuff. And they've got a duo out now. So 2 of the guys in the band are starting their own project, and they're going to be on my podcast in another week or 2. So I'm a big fan of those guys.
This one kind of works if you find that beach and mountain combo. What would be the first place you'd go to post-COVID?
Yeah, I'm going to go to a beach, man. I'm going to go lay on one of those sunbeds and just have drinks just fired to me on
your belt
rope. Like just, and just like, thank you. That's what I'll be doing. That's definitely what's going to happen.
And last one, what would be your dream comedian to work with?
Ooh, so many talented people. I'm a big Bill Burr fan. I think Bill Burr is hilarious, and it's just so prolific in terms of how many hours he's put out, and so yeah, I think Burr would be cool. Also, he'd be cool because it's not just perform with them; it's like you'd have to hang out with them, and I think he'd be a cool guy to hang out with too. So I would say, I'd say Bill Burr. Talk sports.
Yeah. Talk Boston.
Talk Boston.
Well, Trent, thank you very much for being on. Everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed. This has been the Always Moving podcast, and let's keep this thing moving.